So welcome everybody to this presentation for the Energy Audit Working Group. We're going to begin with this definition, which was provided by Steve Woodbury and fleshed out nicely by Michelle. And I'm just going to read it. An energy audit tells you how your energy is used in your buildings and where you have opportunities for saving. The audit will list the key steps you need to take, such as more efficient heating and cooling systems, better insulation, tighter building envelope, better windows and doors, more efficient appliances, LED lighting, and so on. So that really is it. And we could end right here, except I've put some effort into this. So let's move on to the slides. And I'll begin with a reminder of our goals. Why are we doing all this? Well, we know, but it doesn't hurt to remind ourselves of where we're headed, keeping our eyes on the prize. I'd like to just point out the 50% reduction by 2030. That's not that far down the road. And it'll be much harder getting to carbon neutral by 2050 if we don't meet that target. Another quick reminder of the role of buildings. Buildings occupy, not often understood, the largest piece of the pie when you take into account all the things that go into making a building. And in our state of New Hampshire, it's even a larger piece of the pie. It's nearly 60% for the building sector. And again, a reminder of the role of existing buildings. 2/3 of these existing buildings will be with us in 2050. Therefore, they represent a huge opportunity, and we have to go after them to reach our goals. And because the energy investment in these buildings was made at the time of construction, then they represent a huge value of energy that's already been spent. The greenest building is the one that's already built. There's that wonderful quote. So whatever we do to them is gravy, however we fix them up to become energy efficient, because we're already ahead of the game. Our campus, which you're looking at here in Hanover, spent millions upgrading the building envelope, which had significant failures in the walls and roofs 10 to 15 years ago. But we're still spending $1 million annually on energy, and wonder how we can improve this. Wouldn't it be wonderful to cut that in half, for example? Well, we don't know, and an audit will show us what kind of opportunity we have. Very elemental graphic of how we get to carbon neutral. And this is the classic sequence. Conservation first, energy efficiency, then electrify everything, get rid of combustion on the campus, and add renewable energy. We're going to be mostly talking about energy efficiency today because that's the biggest prize, and everything else will follow from what we can do with our buildings. So step one is the energy audit. And as it says here, it's the least expensive and perhaps the most significant exercise of the entire project, because it will be pointing the way towards our goals and showing us how to get there. So here come the components of a professional energy audit. I emphasize professional because we can't do this ourselves. We can do some of it, and some of us have kind of begun, but I can assure you that the pros will be redoing what we do, and in probably a fraction of the time. So here's the list. I'm not going to read it now, but I am going to go through 1 through 10 in detail. And the first element is the charrette, a kickoff charrette for all residents, and follow up with a comfort survey. So this is your chance to bring all your pet peeves about the building and bring your local knowledge to the table. The audit people don't live here. We do. We know what's going on. It will be very valuable information for them. And I don't know these people. I found them on the internet, but it gives you a good idea of what's going on. You can see all the newsprint pads set up on easels. On the right is an audit that I took part in. I was not the facilitator. The person who did this was very adept at listening and translating into some cogent heading. And then every time somebody mentioned it again, a green dot went up. And the end of this process, there were like 30 or 40 people there and 5 sheets of newsprint that got refined. And it was just a 2-hour morning session, but it really set the tone for years to come. And the energy conservation got in the DNA of all there, and it lives on today. This was about 15 years ago. So here's the step that some of us have already taken. Here at Kendal, we were fortunate to receive reams of data from facilities going back nearly 20 years. And Scott Drysdale analyzed the data and made these elegant charts which show us how many gallons of propane we use and how many kilowatts of electricity over the years. And you can see if there are any trends or not. We don't discern any particular trends, but some square footage has been added. This is step 3. The audit team will examine all the historical records that exist, including old drawings, specs, historical energy data, and contractor submittals, for example, which are the submissions to for the architect's approval and engineers to make sure the building got built with the items specified, and any previous testing, diagnostic testing. So item 4, determine our miles per gallon. We're trying to find some metric that we will all eventually be able to relate to know how good or not so good our buildings are. So what you see here is my efforts. I'm not a computer scientist like Scott, so I kind of struggle with these things. I shouldn't say this publicly. An architect who struggles with numbers. I have to do it the old-fashioned way with a soft pencil and a big eraser. But here's what I did. First, select a 3-year average. And I took 2017, 2018, and 2019 and added up all the kilowatt hours and all the gallons of propane, but I had to convert them, first of all, to BTUs. So we could add apples and apples. And I get this huge number here, the total BTUs. And then I divide it by the square footage and I get a number. And so that 80, what does that mean? So that is the energy use intensity. That's our miles per gallon, but it's in BTUs per square foot. And unlike miles per gallon, we're aiming for a low number, not a high number. And here is this chart full of numbers. They're all EUIs. This is a collaboration between the EPA and Architecture 2030. And it's got, the EPA has a huge database from thousands of buildings across the country. And on the left, you see all these building types. And down here is healthcare, long-term care, nursing, assisted living. That's about as close as we get to us. Moving to the right, you'll see this number here. This is the average of all these building types in the US of the energy that is consumed at the site. And then you see this heavy vertical line. Everything to the right is information from Architecture 2030 about how we get to our goals. You'll see here, this is this 50% target by 2030. It's 1/2 the EUI of this one, and so forth. So, and maybe how low can we go? Well, that we don't know. That's one thing the audit will tell us. This example assumes we might get into the 30s. So up here are the targets, the 50% target and so on until we get as low as we can go. And that's the target EUI from the protocol developed by Architecture 2030. Ed Mazria founded that organization about nearly 20 years ago. It's been hugely influential. So zeroing in on this a little bit, the other thing we're doing is we have a benchmark now. You see the 50% by 2030, and it's from this benchmark, all our improvements are measured. And it also, the audit team will be able to take this number that we have and compare it to our peers. So we'll know how well we're doing. This definition from the DOE mentions that it can be a motivator, and that's very true. And here's this great mantra that the green building people are always using: you can't manage what you can't measure. I just want to say a word about Ed Mazria, whom probably very few of you have ever heard of. But without him, the building sector would be nowhere near where it is today. His entire career, beginning in the 70s, has been focused on architecture, energy conserving architecture. And his organization, Architecture 2030, has had a national and now a global influence. He's at all the COP conferences, Paris and COP 26. And so he's just had a huge influence on and he's getting the highest award from the American Institute of Architects last year. So that shows you where the profession stands on this issue. So we're still on miles per gallon. And here's the classic sticker that is required on your car. And we're wondering, why shouldn't we have the same thing for our buildings? Will we be getting a sticker? It's a much more significant purchase. Your house or your company headquarters, whatever. Why not require an EUI disclosure? Well, in fact, it's coming. In fact, it's here in New York City as of last fall. All buildings over 25,000 square feet must post their EUI right at the front door, along with a letter grade from A to F. And other cities are following this lead. So here we're looking at this eighth wonder of the world, truly, New York City from across the Hudson. And it's probably the most wasteful construction project on the planet going back 400 years, where the MO has always been tear down, build back bigger, not better. And this is the result, this astonishing result. But now with this new law, people are beginning to realize the value of these old buildings, and hopefully this will change. Of course, there's always this urge to be bigger and taller in New York City, but we're recycling everything else. Why not the ultimate recycling buildings? That's really will make a huge difference. So we're at number 5, identify opportunities for significant savings. This is the biggie. Everything that follows afterwards will depend on how well we do this. The building envelope within this is the key item. The envelope being the walls, the roofs, basements, windows and doors, and any penetrations. And all of these working together in a high performance building envelope is the key to achieving big savings. And we're shooting for 50% or more. We may not always get there. Some of our buildings are better than others, but that's the goal. And here, this little sketch shows the components of the high performance building envelope. First, make it airtight. Second, furnish 100% fresh air with energy recovery ventilation. And third, make sure you have effective high R insulation. I remember a consultant telling me once, Stu, if you see this maroon line here, if you can take your pencil off that line, you've broken the air barrier. Now that was very hard to detail in the drawings and even harder to build at first, but now this is pretty much the way green buildings are done and need to be done. So the role for the audit is test existing buildings to establish the base case air tightness value. There's a number. Locate problems and recommend energy efficiency measures and test. You need to test before, during construction, and after. And so the audit team will be, we'll be looking at these tests and from there seeing how far they can go. And this is building science, our lab proof. And I contend that there is no building that can't be made energy efficient. This is a deep energy retrofit. Some of you have heard that term before. Steve mentions it several times. This is what we should be looking at. In this case, it was a 19th century building. And here's the testing of the old building after it was completed. And this is testing the air tightness of the building with the blower door, pressurizing the building. On the right, there are a bunch of numbers that shows the CFM per square foot. It turns out this old building could be the envy of any brand new green building in terms of its air tightness value. So anything's possible when you're doing a deep energy retrofit. This is the other big diagnostic tool. You're looking at a drone equipped with an infrared camera flying over this building. The engineers looking at this image on the right would say that's a very hot roof, and it's indicating there's a problem there with heat loss. And at our Kendals with the different floor plans, the audit team will be investigating, they'll be seeking typical units. They don't have to test every unit, but maybe every type of different sized units, maybe different orientations, maybe even some were built at different times. But an experienced team will be able to get typical units and be able to extrapolate and get close enough to understand how well the complex is performing as a whole. And this is where the comfort survey will also be helpful, and the information gleaned from the charrette. Identify energy savings. We're still on item 5. We need to analyze the existing HVAC and electrical systems and identify weaknesses. In this old building, it was sort of a no-brainer. That's a steam boiler that came off an old steamship on Lake Champlain. And then recommend energy efficiency measures. At our Kendal, we have this wonderful gizmo on a dashboard downstairs in the lobby. It's not that user-friendly, but the engineers, the audit people will love it because it measures energy flows in the building throughout the complex. Anywhere in the building, you can get instantaneous performance or the EUI from a year. It's all based on BTUs per square foot and EUI. As I can imagine a more user-friendly version of this that's geared to tracking our improvement as we get closer to our goal. Could be very exciting. So still on looking for opportunities and weaknesses and what's going on here. Is this a natural phenomenon? Or is it an opportunity? We don't know until we take a look. and test. Can't manage what you can't measure, again. And this is kind of where it gets personal. On our first spring thaw in 2019, we were greeted with a roar from above, 3 stories up. I was out walking the dogs, and a huge slabs of ice landed right on our bench. This was not icicles. These are ice dams building up over time after a big snowfall, and it gets very cold for a week. And this is what happens over time. And this was 2019. It's happened now 6 times, and this was last February. We got facilities to erect these little plant protectors to keep us from walking there. So it looks like we found ground zero. But it is a matter of life safety. It's kind of strange that the architect happens to pick this apartment. I must be really frustrating to facilities, but it keeps happening. So number 6. So we've really gotten past the very heavy lift, and now we're into converting to the all-electric operation. These are very likely means of converting to electric and getting off propane or oil or whatever fossils we're using. There's a heat pump hot water heater, and 2 versions of heat pumps that will actually heat and cool our buildings. Number 7, examine the potential for on-site renewables, most likely solar. This is looking down at our campus. We were told originally that our rooftops were facing the wrong way. We consulted with a solar engineer, and she came up with this. She did a 4-hour study for us, that indeed we have a terrific opportunity. Nothing wrong with a southeast facing roof. You pay a surprisingly small penalty for not being due south. So we might get 20%, or if we shrink our load way down, quite a bit more. So we need to take a careful look at this. All of our campuses have some solar opportunity, and we need to know what it is. And the audit people will dig into this. I just want to spend a little time going over this chart. What you're looking at here is one of the oldest conservation organizations in New Hampshire. And this is their 1980 passive solar headquarters. And we have done 2 significant additions since then. So the buildings are getting on, nearing 40 or 50 years old. And about 10 years ago, I suggested to the leadership that it was time to upgrade the whole place and see how close we can get, see if we can go to net zero. And the leadership and everybody agreed. I put together this team. And what's exciting about this chart, everything on the right column in yellow, that represents an EUI. Up at the top is the base case. That's what we measured. And we got, call it 48. That was our starting point, which wasn't too bad actually, but we want to see how low we can go. And I need to emphasize that this is where the computer comes in, and it's extremely important. And it's also pretty cool for me to be able to participate in this. My role was kind of to ask the dumb questions, but it was very exciting. Every area in the building was analyzed, and watching the engineers and green building science people go after these was like a dog after a tire. So we'd look at, plug all these things into the computer, like, well, one of the things that's changed a lot since 1980 is glazing, glass. And what happens when you change out ineffective low U value window with the modern upgrades to double glazing to triple glazing with terrific coatings on the glass. that makes a huge difference. And so on and so forth through electrical controls, air sealing, everything you can think of. And it starts marching down, and we got all the way down to 28. That's our target. So we completed phase one in 2018. We were right on the money, right where the computer predicted. Then came the pandemic, and then came a change of leadership and a couple of other things. And I hope this will get picked up again before too long. But this is the way an audit will go through our existing buildings. This is what the team will be. This is the process, and it's pretty exciting. Oh, just this quote here from Architecture 2030: engage in iterative energy modeling throughout the entire design process to understand the interactive effects of various design decisions and assess progress towards meeting the EUI target. These things tend to influence each other. For instance, if you don't have a big envelope improvement, you won't be able to save money with the remaining HVAC electrical equipment because the load is too big, or you'll have to buy more solar or put more capital expense for installing solar. So they all relate to each other. So we're getting near the end here. The financial analysis is a big piece of the audit, and there are a lot of sophisticated things that they'll be looking at. The main takeaway is there are ways to finance these, and the key is looking at it over the life cycle. And there'll be things like the savings to investment ratio, net present value, and don't ask me to explain these, it's way beyond my capabilities, but there are ways to look at this that will tell us whether it's a good investment or not. And it's the elephant in the room. This is not a political commentary, but it's a huge expenditure. This will be very likely millions for most of us. And how on earth are we going to pay for it? So different financial tools have emerged. One is this green bond. What is this? Turns out there are a lot of people who have made megabucks who really want to give back and maybe help take climate mitigation action or invest in a green building project. And it turns out in California, where the next, our newest Kendal is about to open, and I think this year, that's exactly what's happening. Now, investors are funding a $308 million green bond to cover everything. And at the last meeting of our Energy Audit Workshop group, we learned that this was actually oversubscribed. I think it was Ted who mentioned that it's been a very successful bond sale. And the key here is that it will require a green building certification to attract investors. And whether or not we go for a green bond, I think it's important that we do pursue certification because it assures that we will get the kind of performance we're looking for, really hold our feet to the fire. So we're, oh yeah, it's very important. This is not the time to think small. So last on the list is deliverables. What do we get? Well, in addition to a final report, I would like to see a public presentation. This will kind of bookend the opening kickoff charrette. They will describe the journey that we've all been on. It will get everybody involved in the process, and it could be a great way to wrap it up. And so that's it. And for the next meeting, I'm suggesting, how do we hire the good building audit team? Thank you.